Here we are, the second Sunday of the Easter season. And like we hear every second Sunday of Easter, we have this gospel lesson that many refer to as the story of Doubting Thomas. But I don't like that name for him. And I think just about every year since I've been ordained, I've preached a sermon this Sunday on why we shouldn't call him Doubting Thomas. And I don't want to preach that sermon again this Sunday, but I will say this, that it doesn't make sense to call Thomas Doubting Thomas, because all he wanted was the same thing the rest of the disciples had a week earlier, or really that same day. Earlier in the week, they were afraid of what had happened. Jesus has just been resurrected from the dead. They've been told by Mary Magdalene that he's not in the tomb, that he's been raised to life, but they're still hiding and afraid. And then Jesus comes to them while they're locked in a room and shows them the mark of the nails in his hands and the mark of the spear in his side. And that's all Thomas wants, is to be able to see what they have seen. And so that we would call him Doubting Thomas for asking for the same thing his brothers got is kind of a ridiculous thing. That's all I'm going to say about Doubting Thomas. And the reason I don't want to preach that sermon again is because focusing on that aspect of it overlooks a much more important fact that's given to us in the gospel this morning. And it's something we overlook time and time again. It's something that, yeah, it's obvious if we think about it, but we never think about it. And it's the fact that the resurrected Jesus still has the marks of crucifixion on him. That's a big deal. That's not something small. Because if a resurrected life is supposed to be a life that is perfected in God, then what sense does it make for Jesus to be resurrected but still bear the marks of crucifixion? What that means for us today is that when we are perfected in God, it doesn't mean that all of the pains we have suffered and endured will just go away. It doesn't mean that all of the physical, spiritual, emotional scars will just vanish. But all of the things that we see as imperfections in ourselves will be made perfect in God. And I'm reminded of a story I read while I was still in seminary. And it was a sad story, and there's this small part of it that just has really stuck with me all these years. And it's about a priest in this very small village. And earlier in the day in this village, this little girl had died. And it was a very sad situation. And this girl was very well known in the village as the homely girl. She was not attractive by any standards. She had one leg that was significantly shorter than the other and had many other defects. And so she was known as a happy girl, but she was not attractive. And no one looked at her and said, "Oh, that's a pretty child." And so she had passed away. And now this priest is in the process of dying. And as he's dying, he's having visions of heaven. And in one of these visions of heaven, he encounters this little girl. And the first thing he notices is that this is the most beautiful little girl he has ever seen in his entire life. The second thing he notices is that she looks exactly the same as she always has. Perfection in God doesn't mean that we will be somehow physically prettier or handsomer than we are now. It doesn't mean that all the scars of life will fade away. All the things that have happened that have made us who we are at this point in time will remain with us. but they will no longer be a burden. My brothers and sisters, this is good news. Because this means that whatever baggage you may carry, whatever fault you find in yourself, whatever reason you have for thinking you're not good enough, you're not man enough, you're not woman enough, you're not whatever enough for God or whoever, none of that matters, because who you are this very moment is a perfect creation in God's image. You are perfect. You just can't see it yet. One day, we will see our own perfection, and it will be so amazing because we will look and see ourselves as we are right now and say, wow, I was perfect then. I didn't see it. I thought I needed to lose a few pounds. I thought maybe I needed to grow some hair back. But really, I was perfect the whole time. But I was looking at it from the wrong angle. This Easter season is about seeing your own perfection through the lens of the resurrected Christ. We will still bear the marks of life. We will still have all the baggage that we have now and that we will attain before we die. But when we come face to face with our God, He will lift all of our baggage for us. We will no longer be weighed down by thoughts of faults or imperfection. I pray that you see yourself more perfect each and every day. That you come to know the perfect version of yourself that already exists, but you just don't know it yet. That's my prayer for you this Easter season. That's the lesson that we have, and that's why we shouldn't be arguing about doubting Thomas. That's a red herring that we go down. We chase that trail, and we ignore the big picture. Christ is risen, and through Christ's resurrection, you and me and every single person we will ever meet is perfect. So I pray that you find that perfection in yourselves. Amen.